Hi all, today we're going to be talking about the Vallejo, a Tier 9 premium American cruiser, available for 22,000 steel. The Vallejo is decent. It's not a particularly strong ship, and it doesn't have a lot of actual raw game impact, but it farms. And it kills cruisers, and it kills destroyers, and it farms. It's very similar gameplay-wise to a lot of other open water cruisers. You will pretty much be holding the trigger with this thing until you cannot, and you burn things down. You kill people, you obliterate destroyers, you farm down cruisers, you farm down battleships, and that's how you make your game impact. You just want to, primarily you'll bully a lot of cruisers, but you snap destroyers if they get close to you, and, well, when you've got nothing else to shoot, you farm battleships with fires. It's a pretty decent ship in my opinion. Do I think she's worth the 22,000 steel? Not really. I think she's probably the last steel ship, or one of the last steel ships that's worth picking up. Because, honestly, it's not a particularly exciting gameplay concept, and given that most other steel ships will run you 22 to 24k with coupon, whereas Vallejo will still run you 17k with coupon, give or take, I don't think she's that important unless you're really desperately in need of a Tier 9 premium and don't have coal for some reason. Still, I like playing her a lot, so that's why I'm talking about her. We're going to run through her general stats, how I'd build her, what I recommend on her, and then I will commentate a game I've had with her and kind of show you, how she works, how she plays. So, moving first to her survivability, it's about 45k base. I'm running Ovechkin with Survivability Expert here, but it's about 45k base, which is not bad. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. In the way of armor, it's pretty weak, however. You've got a 25 bow and nose, along with a huge strip of 25 all along the main plate, so you get overmatched a lot. Luckily, your deck is 38, which helps you a lot at long range, which is where you'll want to be. However, your main belt's only 102, and it's not very well protected, to be honest. You have a pretty massive citadel as a whole. The only saving grace is that if you're angling at range, you will still bounce a lot of shells, because 38 deck, 102 belt does work, but you still get overmatched a lot by 457 battleships. Even 406 battleships will overmatch you most of the time. And, in general, most of your survivability comes from being at range and being annoying to hit, rather than actually having good armor. Moving into her guns, they're pretty similar to Worcester's guns. You'll notice that they are the exact same amount, you just have one less of them. You have 5 of them instead of 6. With Reload mod, you get a 5.4 reload, and you get 15.7 km of range. Notably, you get a rapid takeoff spotter, which bumps you up to about 18.9, I believe. It's about 18.9, 19k, roughly in that range, and we'll talk more about that once we get there. It's good enough range. I wouldn't recommend reload mod, range mod, but we'll get to that soon. You'll pretty much only be loading HE in this thing. The AP doesn't really have the ballistics to be worth using. You've got 30 mils of pen and a 14% fire chance when spec'd for. It's pretty good. You also have got 2400 HE if you take heavy HE, which I do recommend. Notably, these ballistics are more akin to Soviet-like cruiser ballistics rather than American cruiser ballistics, so you're a bit better over range than, say, the Worcester, the Des Moines, etc. But they're not quite as floaty. They're still fairly floaty, like you'll still hit targets behind cover a lot, and you'll still want to use islands where you can, but it's not as floaty as the Americans, which, whether that's a benefit or a drawback is largely up to you, but I would argue it's a benefit. Your single airstrike is for depth charging submarines, but you still get wrecked anyway. AA-wise, you're one of the better cruisers in the tier. After all, it is essentially a Worcester with a turret knocked off, and a slightly different AA setup, but you're still pretty good AA-wise. It's not exceptional. A good carrier will still strike you, but it's pretty good for what it is. You could honestly commit to an AA build for the funny. I've tried it. It's not great, but you do bully carriers if you full commit to an AA build. I don't recommend it, but it is an option, and you're still pretty good out of the box anyway. Maneuverability-wise, you're at 34.1 knots, your turning circle is and your rudder shift is unless you take rudder mod. That one's up to you. We'll talk to that soon once we get into the equipment. Concealment-wise, it's a bit of a mess. It really depends how you build. For example, if you don't take heavy HE, you take Conceal mod, and you take Concealment Expert, you're down to, I think it's 10.4, give or take, which is good. But given that you're essentially an open water gun cruiser, whether you actually take all these perks is largely up to you. You'll note I only have an 11.9 conceal, so whether you want to really commit onto concealment is up to you largely. You can make arguments both ways. I'd recommend at least taking Concealment Expert, but it is still largely up to you. Moving into the equipment, I would take spotting aircraft in slot 1. Of course, it will run you some coal, but given that this whole ship's main gimmick is having access to rapid takeoff spotter, it helps you a lot. It gives you 30% more uptime, and just take it. If you don't have the coal, just take main armaments 1. Slot 2 should be engine room protection. You don't want your shit to break on you. Slot 3 should be aiming systems because it's more accuracy. Slot 4 is a bit of a toss-up. I found propulsion to be better than steering gears, but it largely depends if you prefer to speed juke or if you prefer to use the rudder. I find that propulsion usually does a bit more for you, but this one is largely up to you. And if you don't take steering gears in slot 3, you might want to just take it, or slot 5, sorry, you might want to just take it in slot 4. As for slot 5, there's an argument to be made for both concealment and for steering gears. Concealment will just make your concealment even better. Like I said, you get all the way down to like a 10.3 if you go for the full build on it, whereas steering gears will give you 40% more rudder shift. And that gives you a really, really nice rudder shift. So it's largely up to you. I personally prefer steering gears because since I'm open water gunning a lot of the time, the concealment is handy, but it's not super important. I'd rather have the rudder to dodge shells and torpedoes. Slot 6 should be main battery mod. I tried range mod, but since you have the rapid takeoff spotter, you don't really need the extra range. And honestly, if you have both the range mod and the spotter up, you still won't be accurate at long range, even with the slightly better ballistics that the ship has. I'd go reload, unless you're allergic to your spotter or you take fighter for some reason, in which case go range. You get a standard damage control party, you get a fairly standard FAA, you get a fairly standard heal, which is very appreciated on the ship, and you get the rapid takeoff spotter. This is very, very similar to the Lazo, for example, if you've ever played the Lazo, or at least you know how its spotter works. So long story short, you have a 10-second spotter reload speed, and you have a 60-second spotter duration. This is bumped up if you take, say, spotting mod, or if you take Eye in the Sky in your captain, which I highly recommend doing. And what this does is it just gives you 20% more range for about 80 seconds if you're built for it. You also get 8 of them if you're built for it, which means that even if you're spotter planing all game, you probably will not run out of them. I've never dipped below 3 planes, and that's on a long match where I was opening water the whole time. I would not worry about running out of them. Use them pretty liberally. If someone's about to go out of your range, hit the U key, send up the plane. Flags are standard cruiser flags. Obviously, heal flag is really nice. Fire flags, det flag, you know the drill. If you play cruisers, you probably already have your flags automatically mounted. As for the commander, a quick word on Special Commander Ovechkin and Halsey. Halsey is decent, but not amazing. Obviously, if you get Confederate, that's more reload, that's more farming for you, but it's not super important. Ovechkin, I would say, is slightly better, if only for the fact that he's boosted Survivability Expert, which helps a lot on the Vallejo. Regardless, it's not important to have either one of them. And in general, you could rock a standard cruiser commander just fine. As for perks, pick Last Stand, pick Demo Expert, pick Eye in the Sky, pick Heavy HE, pick AR, pick Superintendent, pick Survivability, and pick Concealment if you want to. As for why I've picked some of these, Last Stand is obvious. If your shit breaks, you don't want to die. Demo Expert was basically just my last 2 points, and it's a bit more fire chance. Eye in the Sky gives you 2 more planes and a 5-second quicker reload on the spotter plane. It's not huge, but if you're chain firing at something, I suppose it's nice to have. Heavy HE gives you 10% more HE damage, which is very, very nice, given it's the only ammo type you'll be using. Do note the concealment penalty, so you could not take this one if you don't want to hit that concealment, but largely up to you. AR is the best perk in the game, Superintendent is mandatory because it's an extra heal, Survivability Expert lets you tank more, and Concealment is just nice to have. For the other slot 4s, IFHE is not worth building simply because you already pen 30 mils and you really don't want to lose that fire chance, and you're not generally close enough to make any use out of top grade gunner. Other than that, Outnumbered could be handy, but it's really not super useful, I would argue. And if you're AA build, take AA Defense Expert, because it's funny, I guess. That's the Vallejo in port, and now we move over to a commentated game. So, here we are on the Faroe Islands, and I've cut it right into the opening engagement because, well, I figure you don't want to watch the boring first couple of minutes where we're just sailing directly. So we spawn south, and I'm here with my div mate. And looking at our situation, we see this Friedrich de Gross. We don't see anything else near him, so we look, we think, we hit the U key, and, well, as I've alluded to many times this video, we press the U key and we start firing. This is peak Vallejo gameplay. However, we do see their destroyer, the Torrigo, so we switch targets. Now, we're still peak Vallejo gaming. We see target, we hold mouse 1, we deal damage. It's that simple. The ballistics are a little funky to get used to because they're not quite as great as Soviet cruiser ballistics because their velocity is still rather low, and they're not quite as floaty as American ballistics, but whatever. We complain a little bit about that, but we keep going on our way. With their destroyer dead, we switch right back to the Friedrich, and it's peak Vallejo gameplay. There's a target, we see the target, we hold mouse 1 on the target, we kill the target. It takes a while, and we farm a lot of damage this way. We also use our rudder, we use our engine, and we hope the Friedrich doesn't shoot at us because we're giving a surprising amount of broadside to him right now. If this Friedrich were a smart player, which is a rare occurrence in 2023 World of Warships, well, he would shoot AP at us and he would probably delete us. However, instead, like the gamer he is, he fires HE. We point, we laugh a little bit with our friend in voice chat, but this doesn't really concern us. We see that he burns a damage control, and as such, we keep firing. Are you noticing a pattern here? There's actually not a whole lot I can say about playing the Vallejo itself because, well, this is Vallejo gameplay. You see target, you press U key if you need range, you hold on target. It's that simple. Unfortunately, our spotter went down, he's about to go out of our range, but this isn't really a problem because even though he's about to go out of our range, we have a rapid takeoff spotter. So as a result, we press the U key, we keep farming. It really is that simple. We're about 4 minutes into the game, not even, and we're already at 60,000 damage, because this Friedrich has decided to completely throw his life away on trying to push the southern flank all alone into a Vallejo. This is where the Vallejo really shines. It puts out a lot of DPM, honestly, it's actually pretty high up on the DPM chart for Tier 9 cruisers. And when people just kind of drive into you and don't really shoot back at you, it's free damage. So, with the Friedrich out and dead, thanks to our division mate, Dark Force, he's great by the way, we turn up and we see that, well, C looks clear. At this point, there's not really a whole lot going on C, none of their team have really committed to it, so whatever. We'll slowly make our way towards the middle because that's where most of their team is, and this is the part of the recording where I just kind of talk about whatever while I wait for something actually interesting to happen because I don't want to be jump cutting this game. So how are you today? Are you doing good? I'm doing fine. It's kind of hot, but, you know, I'm doing fine. So, yeah, the Vallejo is... it's an interesting ship. As I said earlier, it's 22,000 steel without the coupon. And honestly, at 22,000 steel, I can't recommend it. In fact, in general, as a steel ship, I can't really recommend it. It's weird that they took out all the previous not tier 10 steel ships away and made them into coal, and then introduced the Vallejo right after. I think it's a very low priority steel ship to get, unless you really like open water cruiser rat gameplay, which I do. That's why I got it, because I thought it would be funny, and I like the Vallejo. Don't get me wrong, I actually like the Vallejo a lot. It's a fun ship to me. But it's not a particularly competitive tier 9, because it lacks a radar or anything strong to make game impact. And honestly, unless you're holding and just burning things down, you don't really do a whole lot. It's a good ship. I would argue it's a good ship, but I would argue it's not a heavy game impact ship. I would very much argue it's not a priority ship. I think for the steel ships, you could get Ragnar for almost the same price if you use the coupon for Ragnar. And Ragnar's really strong. Like, it's a very low priority steel ship. So, whether you want it, of course, is up to you. It's your steel. But I wouldn't recommend it, unless you have nothing else to get. So now that we're actually back in the field, I can talk a little bit. So, we catch the Renown, or maybe it's the Repulse, sorry, it's the Renown 44. And we catch the West Virginia 44 as well. And these are both fairly slow battleships, all things considered. And thanks to our Yuki, our rapid takeoff spotter, we just kind of farm them. It's Vallejo gameplay. We see slow battleships, and we see not much else to shoot, we shoot them. We notice this Brest is pushing up pretty far. And we're a little worried because it's a Brest. If he loads AP, he can very quickly delete us. However, he seems to be preoccupied, and we know via matchmaking monitor, thanks to my division mate and friend at the start of the game, that he's actually relatively good. So we're a little worried, so we decide to game return right here in the hopes that we turn out, and maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to get a good angle on him while driving away, and hopefully he won't deal too much damage to us. Now he fires AP, and we're a little worried. We're actually really worried right now. However, we speed juke and we avoid a lot of damage, and this saves our ass. And, thanks to this Vallejo's ship's 30 mils of HE penetration, stock, without IFHE, we melt him. We farm. Vallejo's really good at melting cruisers. Now we're really flat to him. And we are a little worried, and we take a decent hit, but it's not that bad. The Brest dies next to our Georgia, and we see that there's a split, and we know that the Katsonis is also pushing directly into the cap. So at this point, we're looking at the map, and we're firing at the split and the Katsonis when we can. We're not going to land many shells at all. In fact, I don't even think we land any. But at this point, we know we can be aggressive. Sure, we don't have a radar or hydro, but these destroyers have not shown to be very good players. So I'm not too worried about them torpedoing, and if they do end up torpedoing, I'll be nose in anyway, and I'll probably only take 1 or 2, and I have the HP to do that right now. So we swing all the way back around, and we start pushing in. We're at 100k damage. You know, we're doing decent. It's not a great game at this point, but it's a fairly alright game. We've made our impact. So we're just going to turn in, and we're going to push square into the split in the Katsonis. Unfortunately, the Katsonis radars and kill Stark Force. This is unfortunate because I'm now out of the only teammate I can actually trust in a match. So we don't have any vision on the split or the Katsonis as a result, so while we continue to push into them, I take a bit of a gamble. I see that they have a Colorado all the way at the top of the map, and I decide to farm him. This is a little risky, and I know this is a little risky because, honestly, if the Katsonis pulls out a bit, there's a real risk that I could get spotted here. And that opens me up to a bad crossfire from the battleships that aren't really doing anything, but whatever. Split gets detected. He gets actually flickered by the carrier planes flying right over, and it's supremely unfortunate because he ends up dying. It's a free destroyer kill. It's not much more, but, you know, we're still pretty happy with it, all things considered. We keep farming the Colorado because, well, what else are we gonna do? Like, we see enemy ship, we hold the trigger, we fire. I've said it many times before, and I'll keep saying it. This is Vallejo gameplay. Honestly, if this match doesn't really sell you on the Vallejo, you probably won't enjoy the Vallejo. It's an open water cruiser that you pull the trigger in and you kind of play like a rat in. That's all it is. The Katsonis gets detected. For some reason, he pushes out of his smoke, or his smoke starts going away. Whatever the case, he gets spotted, and he doesn't really do anything about it. And as a result, we just kind of melt him. And it's yummy. And we pop our Confederate. If we had Halsey right now, this would be great, because this would be 20% more reload, but we don't have Halsey, so we cry a little bit on the inside, but it is what it is. At this point, we're looking, and we see that their Kansas is pushing out, which could be a real risk, because he overmatches me pretty much everywhere. And we see that the Colorado's kind of just continuing to do nothing. The GD misses his torps, because we figured that would happen. And we still farm the Colorado a bit. And honestly, I probably should have switched to the Kansas earlier, but we do get a fire on the Colorado, making it somewhat worth it. So as I mentioned before, this Kansas is pretty scary. In fact, thanks to Matchmaking Monitor, again at the start of the game, we know he's one of the only good players on their team. So I'm pretty worried. I'm trying to angle. And, well, I go nose in a bit, he strikes, he gets a pretty big hit. Even though I angled, he has 406s, he just overmatches through the bow and leads to a sit. And this is kind of sad, but this happens. Like, normally you wouldn't be this pushed up in a Vallejo, but the enemy team is pretty much folded at this point and allowed us to push in and really use our DPM to make a strike. We flat gamer turn to the Kansas, and I promise you I know what I'm doing here. The Kansas is a long reload, it's like 40 seconds, so I know that I can flat gamer turn to him and he won't fire at me. And, well, it pays off, because now I'm able to turn away from him and minimize the strike that he gets back. In fact, he hardly does anything at all. He doesn't even snap a turret for what it's worth. At this point, we got a high caliber a bit earlier. I didn't mention it because I was busy rambling about the Kansas, but, you know, we're eating real well at this point. Unfortunately, the Kansas goes behind terrain. We can't really do anything about it. We don't have the range to hit the Renown, even with the spotter, so at this point, we're kind of just waiting. We're at 165k, so at this point, this game has turned pretty well, all things considered. The Kansas dies, and this leaves us with nothing but a Chekhalov. And this is where we're about to point and laugh. We're about to point and laugh a lot. So, as I mentioned, the Vallejo is kind of like a small Worcester, especially AA-wise. This makes it one of the better cruisers in the tier. I don't have an AA build. I've fully swapped off my AA build for this game. And this is a tier 8 carrier, and it is a Chekhalov. But you will see pretty quickly how poorly things are going to go for this Chekhalov once he realizes that I'm here and once he tries to strike me. At this point, game's a lock. At this point, I'm just going to rush the Chekhalov because it's damage. If I die pushing him, it's whatever. I've had a good enough game at this point where I'm happy with it. So, we're just going to push directly into him because I want more damage. I'm hungry. Now, The Chikaldov tries pushing me with torpedo planes. An interesting maneuver. So we turn to the side, we reinforce the sector, we slam the FAA. Our long-range AA is kind of shit because we're missing a gun compared to the Worcester, but our close-range AA, his torpedo planes don't hold up too well, and the fighters that he drops don't hold up very long either. He still gets a bit of a strike off, and this isn't really a concern because we're already nose in. We just eat one on the nose. It doesn't even do very much damage. We're already fairly saturated, so we point and laugh at the Chikaldov, as you should do whenever you destroy a carrier. In general, if you ever have the chance to point and laugh at a carrier, or a submarine for that matter, you should. It's funny. It's worth laughing at them. The Chikaldov at this point just kind of drives directly into me, and I'm so confident in my AA by this point that I'm just going to turn flat broadside, and I'm just going to sit still. Honestly, I don't need to dodge at this point. I'm faithful enough in the ship's AA that I can just do this. I can just sit flat to him, make sure all my guns are on target. I pen his deck because 30 mil penetration, and we just kind of farm. And wow, would you look at that? Vallejo is good AA. None of his strikes make it through. He throws plane after plane at me here, and I just rack up free plane kills. I don't really know what his game plan is, but we keep farming the Chikaldov, and, well, we keep ripping him up. It's pretty simple. It sure is peak Vallejo gameplay. He throws one more torp strike at me, but it doesn't really matter because Takaga gets a torp kill, and we end the game with 199k damage. We also pick up a few division achievements. We pick up general offensive, shoulder to shoulder, the like. And that's the match. We come top of our team with 2559 base, and I like this boat. Don't get it yourself. Thank you all.